I want to thank Sharon for coming in and presenting as well. I suggest everyone put their seatbelt on, and off we go. Sharon, the stage is yours, dear.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Frank. And thank you, Jay. And David, you know I love you, brother. Because before me, there was David. He set great examples of how to do your JOB. And just because it's photography doesn't mean you play it lightweight. We all start somewhere. And for me, the photojournalism experience started at Ohio State. And I was a member of Art Choking Times. To go from that to this guy, this is the last place on earth I'm looking for a job in federal government because I live in Washington, D.C., and we can't vote. We don't have a congressperson. We don't have a senator. And we put more money in the tax revenue fund than 27 states put together. So what do I really think? Yeah, this is the last plantation. So our Choking Times was in a corner in the back, and you couldn't have found it without that sign. So it ended up working for a guy who embraces all cultures, all kind of ways of thinking, and he reads a lot. This guy loves history. He loves culture. And for us to go to this unknown spot on Ohio State's campus, this is the back of a gymnasium. That's the only space we could get. And we put a paper out once a month for 3 years that I was there. And we had a small staff, but we made it work. The fun thing about photography for me is you can see the results soon, and you can get the reaction of people who read sooner. And so I began to cover the demonstrations on campus because it's activity. Plus, I get to document, which makes me love history even more because now we're talking my history. This guy here was mentored to more than 15 groups on campus. A lot of administrators and teachers get lazy. They just want to do their job and go home. This is Charles Chuck Williams. He was an assistant dean of students, and he took care to make sure everybody was going to be all right. So because of that, I took pictures. This is Mike White on the left, and he is now president of the undergraduate student body. The guy on the right is Matt. He was a dentistry major. These two were the president and vice president of student government. So we're talking about unity on campus between Black folk and white folk. To keep the dialogue going, they talked me into running for vice president and for Dennis Sargent, who was a real sergeant, to be the president. And we won. I wasn't trying to win, but we won. And we worked well together because, as they say, ebony and ivory know how to get along. Years later, Mike White, who was the president of student government, is now the mayor of Cleveland, Ohio. And we are in Cleveland, Ohio to inaugurate the new Indian baseball stadium in Cleveland. When I leave Ohio State after having an internship at the Associated Press, I come back to Washington, D.C., and I start working in a camera store. And I met a group who was looking for a new photographer for their next album cover. I got the job. Bernice Johnson Reagan asked me why I wasn't working for myself. So I quit my camera store job and started freelancing for a little bit of everybody, including the Washington Post. Sweet Honey in the Rock grows, and they begin to sing around the world, and they keep using me as their photographer for their PR pictures. The more photography you do, no matter what kind of photography you're doing, you get better at what you're doing. You even outgrow your own apartment and you begin to get a studio to do your work in. And meanwhile, the same people who told you how good you are still telling you that. And as they grow, so do I. And when you start to make good contacts with great people, one good thing does lead to another. It really is about the company you keep and the spirit you hold. This is Bernice Reagan and her daughter Toshi. Bernice left the group about 10 years ago, and she and Toshi started to perform together. They've done 2 operettas based on the work of the science fiction writer Octavia Butler. 2 weeks ago, Bernice's daughter Toshi got a music grant from Alpert, who plays the trumpet, Herb Alpert, for $150,000 just to do her work in music. If you take great pictures, people hire you to do other things. So I always try to find things that are effective. This girl is so bad, Even her course mates were like astounded at what she was blowing out. We are community in Washington, D.C. And some of us, when they die, we don't want to be in a hearse. Walk me through the streets where I grew up at, where I worked at, where my church is. And these are 3 street musicians leading this guy's casket for 2.5 miles from Harvard Street on 14th in DC down to Newton and 16th. I also did stuff for groups of people who sang and performed. Always try to make sure my photo credit was there because nobody's gonna know who shot that badass photo if your name's not on it. So I always insist no matter what, where's my photo credit? Where's it gonna be? Because if you don't guarantee your credit, believe me, nobody else will either. The fun thing about photography is projects. Songs of My People is where this photo comes from, shot outside in Brentwood, DC, Maryland. And I had gone to California to shoot for this project, but the pictures that made the book in my backyard. And she says, girl, I'd have rode my bicycle for you, but I fell 2 weeks ago and my hip's still bothering me. At this point, I'm thinking she's 87 years old. I found out later that she was really like 90, 91. So to go to work for him, we from DC, we don't expect to work for government. Our parents did because they had a different upbringing than us. I'm from the movement of Funkadelic, War, Temptations, Motown. My head's in a different direction, but I love jazz, I love chess. But to end up working for him was really like what we call cool beans. Plus here is history for real. They're having discussions about all kinds of things popping off in the world. You can't even get Netanyahu and Nasser Arafat to sit down and talk together. So here, everybody's sitting down for lunch. They unfolded their napkins. They look like they're gonna talk and they got stuff to talk about. Next thing I know, President Clinton and the King of Jordan are getting up, folding their napkins up. And they say, you guys stay here. We'll be back later. They made the security for all them leave. Secret Service helped them get out the library. And then they put people outside the door telling everybody, you can't go in. They had to talk. The decision process.
Well,
Whatever.
Sharon, let me just interrupt you. Did you know that that was going to happen?
No.
No. Okay.
No. You just got to react. You just got to know what you got to do. That's the other fun about it. It's like being on a hot tub and you don't know where the hottest part is, but it's there. But you have to be prepared. When David was joking about me carrying a whole lot of cameras, oh yeah, because sometimes you may get stuck in a spot and can't move because you know how sensitive the atmosphere and you can hear what's being said. And if I got the right camera lens on me, it don't matter where I get stuck. I'm going to wait my time, but I'm going to use one of those cameras that are going to be the perfect size lens that I need for what I want with impact. Because the things we discussed, even the things we could have fun with. This is at the 50th anniversary of NATO that was hosted in Washington, D.C. And here we have, hear no evil, speak no evil, see no evil. On the far right-hand side is the Cheshire Cat himself, the National Security Advisor, who's in charge of all this stuff too. And he's grinning like a Cheshire cat because the things that go on to make diplomacy work, some days it's just so rough you would not believe it. Other days you're like, really? That's all it took? Things go from yin to yang in a heartbeat. When staff members leave that we love and we're gonna miss them, yeah, we have a little party for them. My best ride is always in the helicopter. This is in Kissimmee, Florida, after the hurricane had hit down there. So I'm watching the president's chopper fly over as I'm on another helicopter. Here we're meeting about what to do about the next trouble coming. And he's always got folks around him giving advice, from the State Department, Madeleine Albright, to his press guy, Mike McCurry in front. On the far side is William Christopher, who was Defense Secretary. There are things that had to be decided, and it can't get decided in a vacuum. It can't wait because everybody now operates on a 24-hour clock. Even when you think you sleep, you're going to get a phone call. After an event, we all go back into the White House together. This is meeting with Vietnam for the first time after we left Vietnam. And this led to a trip a year and a half later for us to go to Vietnam, as they were still trying to retrieve the bodies in the aircraft of the people who had been shot down in Vietnam. We went to Mother Teresa's funeral in India. I mean, I thought Haiti was poor. I think parts of America are terribly poor, Appalachia terribly. But let me just say, where India is, they need help. It can't be left like this. The poverty level is everywhere. The caste system is prejudice. It's against all people who aren't rich and light skinned. We get tired too on planes because we've traveled all the time. As we begin to close out our era of 8 years in the Clinton White House, I began to take group shots of the different departments. And where better to do it but on the back steps of the White House? The plane ride, the helicopter, his limo, it weighs a lot, but it's part of the ritual of what we do when we land and when we depart. Here we are in Texas, and the young lady is the daughter of James Byrd, who was dragged by his neck until his body separated. She tried to meet Bush. She tried to meet the mayors and governors and legislative members of the Texas folk, but they wouldn't meet with her. She wanted to talk about a hate crime bill. But President Clinton came and he just hugged her as she cried. Ghana, hey, a lot of people showed up, and I'm thrilled to death because here you got two white people wearing kente cloth. You better believe I got pride. I got pride. Everybody gets their own interpreter, so no one will misunderstand what got said or what was understood. So the two ladies have one, they just listen to those conversations, and the two guys, same conversations, but different. And you don't want to miss the nuances because you don't want to have people misunderstand what you really mean. We're always meeting before we have the bigger meeting because things have to be laid out. Yes, she did those things she probably wasn't thrilled about with flowers and what's the place setting going to be. But Mrs. Clinton was a pistol. She was very adept at being a health advocate and women's rights. And this little stuff here with this foo-foo flower and what's the table gonna look like? Oh yeah, we're gonna make sure it's pretty for you. But that's not her first love. A lot of things we did together sometimes, especially when it was about some fun stuff like maybe her birthday. This is the Delancey sisters up in Mount Vernon, New York. They had written a book called Having Our Say. And at the time, they were both 100. One was 104 and the other 102. And they had been school teachers and one a dentist. And seeing them was like, wow. And I'm like, y'all are so tough. And they're looking at me going, look, sister, they got a colored photographer. And I said to myself, you're talking about me. Oh, I've never seen one before. Oh, Lord. He was an avid golfer, still is an avid golfer. I was golfing before I got to the White House. I love golf. When he says he was going golfing, it's great. If you try to handle me his club, I wouldn't take it. I'm left-handed, and he's right-handed golfer. Sometimes no matter what speech is written, he's rewriting it. He thinks a lot. He reads a lot. He asks a lot of questions. Our meetings go long and may move from one room up to the residence, but the meetings continue. And of course, Socks became D-Cat, and Buddy became D-Dog. This is a snowstorm in DC. Everybody shut down but the photography and the military people. Here we're getting ready for the final cabinet shot. Because the original one was done inside the cabinet, I thought we should do one outside the cabinet. It took the usher's office, Secret Service, the executive leadership of the White House to help this thing get planned. Everybody had to be on board for this to work. The other thing about having cameras is if you have a wide lux camera, you get to shoot panorama stuff. It gives you a better idea of the atmosphere of the room. Hey, I carry gear because I don't want to get stuck and not have enough stuff to get me out of whatever trouble I think I'm in because I can't get that picture. I can get any picture. You take a 300, you take a 15 to 35, you take a 24 to 70, you take a 70, to 150, 200, and you got a 300 2.8, not to mention a 1.4 and a 2x teleconverter. You can't get in any trouble. And if you have to be really quiet, I got two Leicas there too. I know how to be like quiet. And I like wearing dark colors because you forget I'm in the room. So, is there life after the White House? Oh, hell yeah. Because if you do good at what you do, you're going to like everything. And everything brings something different to the table. I love musicians. I love jazz. This is Davey Yarborough, who just retired as jazz in charge at Duke Ellington School for the Arts. This is his wife, Esther. They got their own group that sings and plays and does everything. I love basketball, especially women's basketball, because it's just fierce. Plus, if I get that Sports Illustrated shot, it just adds to what I can do as a photographer. Every photographer needs to love everything because the more you shoot, the better you get at whatever you're trying to do. If you sit and watch TV, if you do nothing but read books and you don't go out and shoot something, you are missing what this life can be and how great it is. Believe me, it's a cool life because censorship in our lives can affect what we do, can affect what we see. If we think no one is listening, that no one cares, we turn to other forms of salvation. Because if we die a noble death, we will not be forgotten. In hope, we can find solace, be it with one, or with two, or with the crowd. As we listen to each other, we must march, we must act, we must vote, so that we, all of us, might stand for something, do something with our education and do something. Thank you all.
Wow. So, Sharon, that is an incredible body of work. I mean, can you give us a sense of what type of guy Clinton was and what the camaraderie between him and Gore, things like that? Because that's always like peeling back the onion for us is always sort of interesting, things that we wouldn't normally know. Or Hillary and the influence Hillary had, on his presidency.
Hillary and Gore probably had the most influence on his presidency. When we were having serious discussions, no matter what it was, if the two of them came to the same meeting that the cabinet was at or the staff that was going to implement a policy or was working on overhauling a policy, and especially when it came to the healthcare and to the union issues about how to support people who wanted unions, as the legs were getting taken out from the unions by the people who own the companies. There was camaraderie that was very strong about what to do about that. And they wouldn't meet just about it once a month. Every other day they'd meet about it and see where things were. So I learned what being intense was, because the things that kept coming up over and over again were not resolved. They had another thought about what direction things should go in. It was a pretty good crew given all the diversity that we had in thoughts and opinions. And if you didn't offer something that was going to make people think, he'd ask you, what are you thinking? I haven't heard from you. And he'd invite people to talk to him with everybody present about, and then we'd have nice arguments. It's like being in court, but you're talking about why one thing ought to happen one way as opposed to another.
So you mentioned that, and David, you may want to jump in here too. The images that end up getting released, right, are, they have a certain thread. But to your point, Sharon, there's arguing and there's bickering back and forth. And I'm sure there's imagery that, exists on those meetings. Is that for you guys a bit frustrating that we don't see that piece of it?
No, because at some point you will. I may be dead, but you're going to see it, because the bottom line is it's all there. We didn't hold anything back from what we shot. It's all in the National Archives or in the Presidential Library.
Yeah, I'm not saying what you shot, but I'm just saying the press room releasing those images of Bill or George, like yelling at somebody.
That's all the press gets to see. You got inside people. That's what I'm in there for. I'm in there sworn to secrecy. I'm in there sworn not to talk about the issues. And I don't. It's fun reading the newspaper and they'll say, so-and-so said this. And you're like, they wasn't even there. And then they say, and then she said this. And I'm like, she didn't say nothing. So I knew that the press could only get hearsay. And I have been in too many meetings where they say, yeah, this one went down. No, it didn't. We ain't talking about that at all. So
you guys may be the photographers in the room, may be the first witnesses to fake news.
We don't know who's faking it. It's certainly not us.
I know that.
Honest brokers or what, but people who make fake news have ulterior motives.
Right.
And they are all dishonest, just like the media is when they hype stuff up like it's a damn soapbox opera day after day after day. Meanwhile, people are still living in poverty. Transit systems still don't work. COVID is still raging. And what do we want to pretend? I don't think so. Photojournalists are not into pretension. Photographers are not into pretension. You're about what you see is what you get. Right. And if you don't go, you can't get. If you don't go, you don't see. If you don't have physical, visible evidence that something went down, I mean, really, I'm supposed to believe you and not my own eyes? I don't think so. And all Photoshop did, as well as what I call the glam community, is make everybody want to be Beverly Hills 10, whatever that program was. Everybody wants to be rich, but they don't want to work at it unless you happen to be born with a golden spoon, or otherwise you're an artist. You're a struggling photographer. You're a struggling photojournalist. You're a struggling writer. You're trying to make your mark in the world because you're not taking life in like it's television. Now, those are the people I admire.
There you go. Anyone have any questions to throw out? We could open up the room. Jay, open up everyone's phone if anyone wants to throw out a question to Sharon or David. If anyone has.
Gotta have questions. This lifestyle is too much to be living for.
Mm. And so, I mean, do you guys actually remember the transition from, one group to the next? Like, do you remember how David was helpful to you, Sharon?
David has always been helpful to me and for me. The longer you know somebody, the more you love them. It's the nature of being a very small, closed club, not on purpose, but it's the nature of the jobs we've held. And anybody can aspire to this. You just have to spend more time around people who are politicians. You have to go to rallies. You have to be working for a candidate. So you figure out who's in charge of what, or who helps make decisions about who works on a campaign. We don't come out of a vacuum. We've done many, many things that lead us on the trail that we don't know we're looking for until the offer is made. And you're like, huh? You talking to me? Really? So there's nothing like a surprise, nothing.
And so you covered Clinton for 4 years, right?
8.
You did the whole 8 years?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Wow. So, I mean, can you give us a sense of, the craziness of the whole Monica thing and all of that? Like, what was that like in the room?
I have no comment about that because everybody is about examining that to death.
Right. Okay.
I got no opinion.
Okay. And like the Camp David meetings or the Ireland peace deal, things like that.
You learn that people have vested interest in why war should go on. You learn that war goes on because the people in charge of their government do better with war than they do with peace. And war stops people from making demands on their government to do the right thing. We watched things come unraveled at Camp David because people on some sides were scared of losing their position, either in Palestine or in Israel, about what they're in charge of. The vested interest does not lie with freedom or fairness. It lies with control and power. I can't wait to hope that things get better between Palestine and Israel. Uh, it's been really terrible to watch how many people die all the time. And how many weapons does everybody need to blow us all to smithereens? I don't know about you guys, but I read a lot of science fiction after having had hope in the Star Trek years, and to see where we are now. This is crazy, y'all. We need more arts programs, more education. School needs to be open 24 hours a day so you can learn a trade. Some teachers don't want to teach in the daytime. They rather teach in the evening. The kids rather go to school in the evening. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with destruction, climate change. A lot of people have COVID and haven't gotten the shots. I don't want to be a oops. I still wear my mask everywhere.
All right, there you go. Well, David, any words?
Well, I loved seeing Sharon's photos. That was great. There were some classics in there. Those two guys sitting on the chairs underneath that sign, the black and white, was like showstopper for me.
Yeah.
Sharon is always right in terms of how you interact with other people, and as a photographer, you're always like you can never stop learning. I don't hesitate. I lead some photo walks, and people will show up and say, "Oh, well, I do this, and that," and it's like, "Oh, I didn't know that," or "Let me try that," and I'm always putting myself out there. I just got put on the Georgetown, Texas Arts and Culture Board, and now I'm involved with not only do I do the photography festival, I manage that, but I do the art. I'm involved with the art festival and the Georgetown Film Festival. I've been viewing films, and but the best part about that is just that I'm keeping myself current, keeping myself out there, and when you do that, I can't tell you how many other assignments I've, paid gigs I get from doing that, and being kind and courteous to people, because people remember that kind of stuff, and they say, well, maybe I like something that this guy did over here, or that person did over there, but I know that guy is gonna get me what I need and zero hassles.
David, so, I got to say, that is so old-fashionedly beautiful. I mean, that is, I do a lot of estimating and negotiating for photographers, as one-offs, and I'm always telling them about building relationships. And that, what you just said, and what Sharon was saying about being decent, being, a good person, man, that is where the repeat business is. And it couldn't be simpler. It really couldn't. How hard is it to be decent?
I mean, I don't go out and advertise at all, zero, and I have to turn stuff away, and I'm at a financial position where I can just lay there on the couch all day and do nothing, but that's not in my soul. And so I've had interns over the years, 20, 30 years, that I've seen go on to do great things, and spent time with them, and kind of mentor and gently nudge, and they do incredible things, and
nothing more gratifying, right?
Yeah, that's a true blessing to have had that opportunity to impact other folks. But here in the next several months, as I fire up the new photography festival, I'm going to meet some new photographers and maybe make some new friends. And I'm an old guy, but it's still fun to do.
Great. Well, if we have no other questions, but I have to tell you, this was another
Right.
great. Someone have a question?
Yep. Wanted to ask Sharon, were you able to, did you shoot black and white film, or is that digital converted, and were you required to shoot color? And how did you determine, were you able to determine you're going to shoot black and white with your wide lux? I'm assuming you could put whatever you wanted in it.
It was up to us to decide what to shoot. Each one of us was a photographer in their own right before we came together at the White House. And we all had different styles. We're like a jazz band. We all got a different instrument, but we grooving and we throwing down. I think we had some of the most important photographic work that had ever been shot at the White House because of our access to all these meetings and decisions, and then the leaders of other countries who had dialogue with President and Mrs. Clinton. There's something to be said about if you dig on in and you keep working hard at it, it just gets better. And before you realize it, it fits on like a glove. You're not nervous, you're not worried. You're gonna get your job done. That comes first.
But there was no regulation, no government regulation. You have to shoot color. You have to.
None of that.
So
And because we got more than one camera, you figure one camera's got black and white in it, the other one's got color in it. You got the wide lux, you got the quiet camera where they're whispering and you don't want to make it click. So the Leica is a great camera. But with the change of lenses, I know how to change a lens so quietly. You don't even know how to change it out. You learn how to pace yourself.
How much did you get to collaborate with the libraries of the president once they got out? How much did they depend on you to come not talk, but to put together archives and that type of stuff?
We had a very good system at the White House. We had a photo edit office that Janet Phillips ran, and she was our archivist. So we put on the bags of film what it was we had shot and who was there. And then she would turn that in the captions for the proof sheets of what we had shot. So everything was always together. When we started doing digital, we only did it because we had to have the stuff as fast as we could get it. And now digital was the new way. So, I say 3 to 4 years before we got out of office, we had started using digital cameras and beginning to appreciate them. I remember the first time they brought a screen and sat it on my desk and said my proof sheets were on there. And I'm looking, the screen ain't on, it's off. And I'm like, this is a bad joke. Where are my proof sheets? Because I got to order the stuff. Where are my proof sheets? And they say, oh no, we're doing it a different way. I'm like, oh, hell no. No. You're messing my rhythm up now. And Bob McNeely says, look at here. You got 2 more weeks of proof sheets and then it's to the computer. And I ain't, no. But that's what happened. So I learned how to live with computers.
You dealt with the change.
But what did after the president got out of office and put his library together, did you have anything to do with that?
No, they had already knew what they were going to do. We had already started having meetings almost 2 years prior to us even getting out of office, because we wanted to have the first digital archives. So the first company the military got, that silver gold halide that they put on that stuff, it didn't last a year. And we're going through stuff that's already been done. And I'm like, this is unacceptable. Got to get another company. And they dragged their butt about doing it. They had who they wanted, but I'm responsible. So I went and found folks in Virginia who did a great job. The stuff exists. It's alive and well because we got the right company to make these discs for the digital images. But the negatives and proof sheets, everybody's got duplicates in the archives, and the original stuff literally is at the Clinton Library.
There you go. Well,
Sharon mentioned Janet Phillips, and Janet was one of those career folks that she was working, doing the exact same thing in my office. And she retired, I think, when President Trump came on. So she'd been around there a long time, but she was one of those like unsung heroes that we'd be running around crazy writing captions on film bags and trying to give her information, and she would make it straight. And you go to the presidential libraries today, and her work is what is causing you to be able to find the images.
That's right,
Yeah.
Janet.
Good shout out, David. That's a good deal.
Yeah, there are those unsung people that just, well, we took the photo, but without somebody being able to find it.
Janet.
Yeah. Well, folks, that was a really terrific evening. I'm recuperating. I think I am, because this was the best 2 hours I've had all week. I've had horrible, horrible food poisoning, but I sat here for 2 hours and I haven't had any pain. So it may be psychosomatic. I can't even tell my family because they wouldn't believe it. But I want to thank Sharon. I want to thank David for donating your time like this to come in and to inspire us and to give us knowledge. That really is terrific. Also, everyone should know that both of the presentations will be up on the projections.live site probably by the end of next week, maybe a little bit sooner. So you can see this, or you can turn on other people. This is really a must-see sort of presentation. So I thank you both. And also, if other people have other people's, photographers that, they think would be great presenters, doesn't have to be at the level of David and Sharon. Anybody. We're always, using this forum for for an outlet for photographers. So that's a standing offer.
Variety is the spice of life. The more you shoot, the better you get. If you don't go, you can't shoot it.
Yes.
Amen.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you both.
great
It
night.
was wonderful, a wonderful presentation.
Thank
David.
you.
Thank you, Frank, for
Thank
putting
you,
it
Sharon
together.
and David. Great sense of humor. Just like I needed that. I broke my thumb yesterday. So it was like the best, hour and something of a lot of hours.
That's
Like
right.
I
Get back
wasn't
to your
in
fighting
pain.
weight. Get that hand healed up. Yes. Get the ball.
Good
Roll
stuff.
the ball.
To photograph with one hand today.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody. David again, Sharon again. We'll be in touch. And
Thank y'all.
David,
Thank
when you
you.
have
Thank
your-
you.
See you,
David, when you have your book ready to go, let us know. We'll have you on. You can talk to us about your book. We would
Okay,
love that.
sounds-
Sharon, same thing as well.
Sounds good.
Okay.